The center of the galaxy is Terra. And of all of its people, its quadrillions of human lives, hopes, dreams, and struggles, they are the ones who lead all. They are gods amongst men. But with a hand gesture, they can damn or deliver entire sectors of space. They are the masters of mankind. They are the High Lords of Terra. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the factions, forces, and organizations of the Warhammer 40k setting, the grim darkness of the far future. Where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. A reminder that we have a natural history and mythology channels now, so hit the links in the description. It's good stuff, or so we're told. And we have super thanks. So if you enjoyed the video more than usual, then sling me a coin. Or of course, Patreon. Now, let us proceed. For today, we are to deal with the most important organization in the known galaxy. As usual, when dealing with a more elaborate and important subject within the setting, it is fundamental that we have some form of structure for the discourse. So we return to my old standbys. Who, what, where, when, and why. Let us begin with what and where, before we progress to whom. For this is no complicated matter, so it is often ignored, diminished, shrugged about, and then moved on from. But it is the most important of all councils or collections of people in the entire galaxy. Imhotep and Rakir, or the Silent King, may believe themselves more important. They are not. Their influence is still waking, their power still rising. Ivrain, Eldred, or even Vect may consider themselves far more influential. They are not. Their numbers are a thimbleful compared to an ocean. Shadow Sun, Ornvar, or even Farsight may consider themselves the light in the darkness, but they are not. They are pups in the footprints, in the very tracks of the mighty. It is the Imperium that rules this galaxy, and never forget it. So we progress to where. It is the center of the known universe. It is the seat of the Imperium. It is the palace and fortress of his most august, most holy Emperor of Mankind. And it is called Terra. The birthplace of humanity, Earth. It has ever been the most important bastille in all of the galaxy, since the fall of the Eldar, which annihilated their race, remaining only leaves where once there were orchards of their kind. Their fleets became corsairs, their fanatics living as peasants on the fringes of the galaxy were near all that remained. A scant few hundred city vessels, the last beacons of a once mighty culture, nothing more than echoes. And Terra, once called Earth, has been the center of the galaxy ever since. The human empire existed once before, a federation of sorts. Enlightened, advanced beyond the dreams of the present era, but it fell to darkness for long millennia. On this world, on Earth, the Emperor rose to lead his people, humanity, and he led them out on a great crusade of conquest, of salvation. None could stop the legions of the Space Marines and their Primarch generals. Nothing but one of their own could ever stand before a Primarch. But why the recap? For context. Because the Horus heresy was built not on the one lie. Lupercal did not just betray his father, He believed some of those things to his very core. He was ready to be turned. He was ripe for the picking. And it is the precursor of the Council of the High Lords of Terra that was one of the steps, one of the stumbles, that led to his final topple into the waiting arms of the arch-enemies, the dark gods of chaos. The Council of Terra. It was made up of humans, not post-humans, at the specific direction of the Emperor, and many Primarchs feared what it meant, hated what it represented. The Primarchs believed that they were created to rule the Imperium, but the existence of the Council of Terra put a chink in that destiny. It let them know that perhaps they were just weapons, just soldiers. If the High Lords were to be baseline humans, then after the conclusion of the Crusade, the utter subjugation of the entire galaxy, what use would they be? And the memory of the Thunder Warriors was brought back. The extermination of all knowledge of their missing two brothers and their legions. And if they were only warriors, what would happen when there was no war? And fear of the Emperor reared its head. And it was almost universal. Now many of the Primarchs would never ever turn. Sanguinius, Rogel, Leman, Reboot, Ferris, Corvus, Vulcan. But even the Angel feared their father, feared being wiped from history, from having their statue removed from the inner palace. Because it had happened twice before, with the Primarchs and Legions of the 2nd and 11th. And so the Council of Terra was a step towards the heresy. It helped it happen. So we have answered where and when. Now, let us discuss the what of the matter. The Council of Terra has altered over the time of the Imperium, for it has been over 10,000 years. But the Council has, largely, remained similar. Power shifts, and ritual and membership change over the time, but the principles and realities of the Council remain comparable. For the High Lords are the most important people in all of the Imperium. They are the heads of their independent states, the wings of the Administratum. By history, tradition, and sheer unadulterated power, the High Lords of Terra are made up of 12 seats. 9 have remained all but static. The other 3 have seen differing orders fill and vacate the seats over the time. From this council, they run the million worlds of the Imperium of Mankind. Now we get on to who, but let us work our way into it. The Emperor is no warm and benevolent ruler. Even when he was awake, aware, walking amongst his own race, even then he was callous and cruel in seeming. For he saw the goal, the path, the stakes. His scale and scope so huge that the individual, even the population of an entire planet or sector even, was less than nothing to him. For when one wages a war on a cosmic and multi-dimensional scale, when one has lived through all of the ages of humanity, at least 48,000 years, when you have seen the first civilizations, walked the first trade paths, witnessed the first empires rise and fall, then gone on to witness every period of humanity, it is very difficult to remain human. The irony of it all. For the Emperor is touted as the most powerful human to ever live. Yet in all of the ways that count, he is barely recognizable as being from our own race. Not in longevity, power, or ability. In all of the ways that make humans what they are, feelings, hopes, dreams, fears, and family, he barely counts as one of us at all. And yet, his council are closer to him in perspective than ever they would be to us, any of us. For even the most powerful and influential person of our times, even the leaders of entire subcontinents, elected or otherwise, lords of millions of people, even they can have little concept of the scope of the Imperium. And these leaders amongst us, whether construed as evil or good, are far more akin to any of us than they are to the High Lords of Terra. For to be a leader in the grim darkness of the far future, it is to be the arbiter of decisions that affect the lives of millions or even trillions of people. With a single word, entire systems are left to their plight in favor of more important locales. For when one is defending, if you try to cover everything, you protect nothing. And the Imperium is beset on all sides, not only by external threats, like the Xenos or alien empires, old or new, demons, denizens of the warp, but also internally. For the fear of psychers, witches, as they are dubbed in the Imperium, apostates, cultists, and rebels, is an ever-present threat. It does not end there. For these are cultural, military, or spiritual enemies that cannot be ignored. But simpler issues for us are also macro headaches and angst-inducing in the kind of humans we are. Food, water supplies, clothing, materials for manufacturing, all are constant strains as well. For the lines of shipping are rarely safe from threat, and even if they are utterly protected, as some areas of the Imperium are, there are still the threats from the methods of transportation itself. Entire convoys of supplies can go missing, never to return, or to be displaced in time so they arrive before they set off, or centuries later than projected in their arrival. So it is an unenviable position to be in, to make sweeping decisions about the lives and futures of so many. With this plethora of variables at play over such a huge expanse of space, over such a swarming number of planetides and citizens, it is a miracle of logistics that the Imperium had not folded in on itself centuries or even millennia ago. And all of this is ruled from one place, one tiny floating globe which used to be blue but is now sheened with shining metals from pole to pole. It is all ruled from Holy Terra, from Earth. And it is one organization, one ruling body that orchestrates the Imperium entire, the Senatorum Imperialis, the body politique of the human race. And when all is said and done, it is a mere 12 individuals who make these most weighty of decisions, the High Lords of Terra. The dark side of it all must surely be the blackened souls of all of those who fill the seats. Imagine, if you will, the most driven person on the planet. Now imagine competing against 1 million of said individuals. They may not be genetically enhanced beyond longevity, but they must surely be the most terrible permutations of our kind. To be able to beat the kind of competition it requires to be a High Lord of Terra in an age like the 41st millennium. There is no depth of horror that would even register in their minds. They would be steeled and more cunning, treacherous and driven than even one in a generation on our world. The consequences of the decisions and actions of the High Lords must individually be enough to crush anyone, if they even had a shred of humanity left to them. Psychopaths and sociopaths at the least. Each has the sheer will to survive to such an extent that they have literally made it to the top of the tree. But the amount of talent that must have accompanied this rise must be equally terrible and equally rare. There are many reasons that the Imperium has stood for so long. One of them is the collected will and brutal pragmatism of the High Lords of Terra. But who is now the question? The more permanent holders of seats are as follows. The Master of the Adeptus Administratum. Do not think of the Administratum as the admin section. It is not. The administratum includes every single wing of what we would normally expect a government and even society to collect, enact, and enforce. They're every single department of every single bureaucracy and structure in the Imperium, above the local level. Most often, they're ever present there as well, if it is a developed world. The manpower alone is a thing of staggering proportions. No other commands even a fraction of the overall activity of the Imperium. They may be more high-profile, more glorious, more dramatic, but they are as a grain of sand compared to the desert world that is the administratum. It is only a fool who dares to anger this august personage, for they can wipe entire populations off a sector through starvation, can embargo a leader, no matter how large, into capitulation. The Ecclesiarch of the Adeptus Ministorum, the head of the cult Imperialis. The equivalent of a pontiff, he is the most devout and holy of all those who live in the Imperium, or so it is said. Every preacher from every corner, church, basilica, or crossroads is his to command. With the ardent faith of the people bred into them from birth, the uncomplicated minds of the Imperium believe with all of their hearts, for to do otherwise is to risk being hoisted on a pyre to be burned alive. And the claim of witch and a pointed finger has ended many a would-be despot. Yet it is also a cudgel that can work on many an enemy of the priesthood. It is only a fool who dares to anger this august personage, for they can, through the mob, bring fire and wrath even to the great and the good. The Fabricator General of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Archmagus, the head of the Adepts of Mars. It is his people, the Adeptus Mechanicus, that keep everything in the Imperium running. It is they who generate the vast majority of technical equipment, both martial and civil. They who are able to create and maintain the fleets of the navies, again, both civil and martial. They who can command the legions of Titanicus, of Titans, many of the orders of knights and their households. They have the phalanxes of the Scutari and the battle automata. Without the Mechanicus, there would be no Imperium. All would break down. Even those worlds that can produce, that are outside of the Forge worlds, need to be maintained by the Mechanicus. The battle tanks of the Astartes, the ships of the line, the transports of the Astra Militarum, the armor of the Sororitas. Without the Mechanicus, humanity would be returned to the caves or feudal worlds across the board, across the entire galaxy. It is only a fool who dares to anger this august personage, for their fury can unleash the Titans, their neglect can end civilizations. The representative of the Inquisition. Unlike many other seats, this one is filled only temporarily, for the Holy Inquisition has 3 wings, 3 orders majoris. The Ordo Xenos, who smite the alien wherever they may be. The Ordo Hereticus, who smite the witch, the mutant, the heretic. The Ordo Malleus, who sniff out the demon and end its schemes. Thus they do not have one single leader. Thus the seat at the Council of the High Lords of Terra is filled by the most pertinent person of the time, or the person who the orders can agree upon, at the very least. The Inquisition may be minuscule in its manpower compared to others at the table, but their impact is unfathomable. They are the witch hunters, alien killers, the hammers of the demonic. The Imperium would fall 100 times over without their diligent ministrations, and they carry the seal of the Emperor himself, his very writ. They can take what they need, when they need, from wherever they need. Of course, this must be tempered with the other consideration. If they can get away with it. If. It is only a fool who dares to anger this august personage, for they speak on behalf of the Emperor's Inquisition itself, and none are above its gaze. None. The Paternoval Envoy of the Navigators. Another rare entry in this list, for the Envoy of the Navigators is not chosen from the most eminent or powerful of their kind, or from a family that are in ascendancy. It is a way to moderate the power of the leading houses of the Navigators. They make sure a lesser house is the one who is given this honour, and an honour it is. For the Navigators are sneered at by some, as they are to all extents and definitions, mutants, or abhumans at the very least. But without them, there could be no faster-than-light transport, for it is the Navigators who must look into the void of the warp and espy the light of the Necronomicon. Each and every ship in the commercial and naval fleets must rely on the guidance of one of these rare abhumans. They are called thus due to being almost static in their mutation, hence they are an abhuman strain. Yet without them, there are no fleets, no crusades, no travel, no commerce. They are the lifeblood of the Imperium, and to try to confront a navigator could be the last thing one might do, for their powers are mighty even unto themselves. It is only a fool who dares to anger this august personage, for opening their third eye will burn you from existence, or opening their mouths can cut your world off for all eternity. The Grand Master of the Officio Assassinorum. He alone who leads the secret order of the Assassins. The deployment of assassins is so rare, so valued are they, that it takes a direct mark of assent from the Council of the High Lords themselves. Not even the gods of war, the Titanicus, are so carefully and sparingly used, for each of these beings is an asset beyond compare. The crafting of the perfect putty for decades, in many instances. Altered, conditioned, augmented, and programmed, these beings are possibly one of the most labor and resource-intensive productions the Imperium creates. And it is no wonder why, for each is a thing of true horror. They are able to slay in many ways, depending on their form and their speciality, but slay they almost always do. As mentioned, near the entire High Lords were once erased from reality by the hand of the Officio Assassinorum. And when they were put down, when the final battle occurred, it was the Space Marines who had to go into the temples of the Assassin Orders to deal with them, and only few came out from any encounter. A tragic loss for humanity, no matter who prevailed. It is only a fool who dares to anger this august personage, for they will know that they are dead. For nothing can stop an assassin who has no heed of his or her own life. The Master of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. The one person in charge of the entire collective of sanctioned psychers across the entire Imperium. They are the mutant psychers cleared as so strong that they can serve an important role for the Emperor, not just be his sustenance. They are soul-forged, most often blinded by it, in an audience with the Emperor. His soul purifies and protects them from the powers of chaos. They are the telepaths of the choirs, who send messages through the warp to distant outposts of humanity. Without them, there would be no communication, there would be no Imperium. They are the seers of the Department of Strategic Prognostication, the combat psychers of the Astra Militarum, and the entourages of many an inquisitor or noble. It is only a fool who dares to anger this august personage, for their minds may melt, or their greatest secrets be put on display, and never know the quarter from whence it came. The Grand Provost Marshal of the Adeptus Arbites. The Grand Provost Marshal is the leader of the enforcers of the civilian law, on most advanced worlds, starports, bases, hives, or even pleasure worlds. The law is upheld by the Adeptus Arbites. They are the harsh crack of baton over skull, or the shield charge into rioting hivers. They are the army within the Imperium that keeps the hell in order. They cull the mutants when they get too plentiful, smash the gangs when they get above their agreed station. They hunt for drug runners, insurgents, troublemakers, and anarchists. For there is no freedom in the grim darkness of the far future. If Joseph Dredd woke up each morning with overcrammed and full ISO cubes, an increased ammo allocation, and a directive to administer instant justice, this would be the Adeptus Arbites, for they are in vast numbers across most sectors. They are the jackboot that keeps the majority of the lowly proles in their place. It is only a fool who dares to anger this august personage, for they can make life difficult for everyone, or make it end for most. The Master of the Astronomicon. The Astronomicon, the most important building and function in all of the Imperium, bar only that of the Emperor and his golden throne, for without one, there is no use for the other. The Astronomicon is powered by at least a fragment of the will of the Emperor, but by so much more as well. For it is a huge structure, the largest they built before the palace was underway, even back in the Golden Age before the Horus Heresy. And here, hundreds of psychers are taken, and they sing their soul song into the void. The Astronomicon collects and directs their energies to form the light of the Astronomicon, the beacon which can only be seen in the tides of the other dimension, known as the warp. Without it, there would be no fixed point by which the navigators would be able to take their bearing. Thus it is, the last place that can ever be allowed to fall again, second only to the Golden Throne itself. It is a fool who dares to anger this august personage, for they can command legions of waiting sanctioned psychers to burn any to a crisp. These are the main seats that can be considered effectively permanent. The other 3 seats, as stated, can be filled from other organizations, but it is important to note that never has this been a representative of the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines. They have intervened before, crushed tyrants, and administered for brief periods, but never sat on the council. This is by the design of the Lord Commander, Reboot Gilliman, but is in keeping with the wishes of the Emperor. The other 3 places, the other 3 seats, are taken from the leaders of the organizations, always jockeying for a place amongst the 12. The Lord Commander Militant of the Astra Militarum, the single person who speaks on behalf of the crushing weight of arms of the Imperial Guard. Every war zone, every war world, every regiment of infantry, armor or artillery. Trillions of fighting men and women under the colours, trillions more in support positions. They are the crushing wheels and locked step of the Emperor's unenhanced armies. The Lord High Admiral of the Imperial Navy. Every cruiser, battleship, dreadnought or escort, they are the Admiralty. Each sector has its own battle fleets, each segmentum more so. The ships of the Navy run into the millions of combat vessels of the line, able to crack the crusts of worlds, scour them of life, face any fleet of Xenos head-on. They are the Imperial Navy. The Abbess Sanctorum of the Adepta Sororitas. The Abbess is the leader and head sister of all of the Adepta, the orders militant and passive of the Sororitas. They are the wearers of power armor. They are the fire of the Inquisition, the pure, the sisters of battle. An army hidden within the dictates of the decree passive, meaning that no man could fight under arms for the ecclesiarchy. Fanatics of a terrifying degree, the female-only order, are unquenchable. the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, the leader of the 10,000, the bodyguards of the Emperor of Mankind. Of all of his post-human creations, they are second only to the Primarchs, for they are beings of a separate caliber to baseline humanity. They take orders only from the Emperor, and deal with any, close or distant, that may pose a threat to the person or honor of the Emperor. And then more minor groups still. The Speaker of the Chartist Captains, who is the mouthpiece of the Merchant Navy. The Chancellor of the Estate Imperial, a puppet of the Administratum usually, as they are the record-keeping segment, important, but lent on heavily. The Lord Commander of the Segmentum Solar. This person rules the segmentum which contains Terra, the Sol System, Armageddon, and a plethora of core worlds. Yet as specialized as these last three seem, they are important on Terra. Hence they have home ground advantage, as well as the shine from being responsible for the seat of power. The Greater Senatorum Imperialis holds representatives of guilds, sectors, planets, and forge worlds aplenty, and is the tip of a spire of oligarchic feudalism that stretches from Holy Terra across every world in the Imperium. They wax and wane, rise at times, but any who fall from grace or power are quickly replaced by another faction or sub-faction. They are the most important people in the entire human race. Alas, this thought is never lost on them. When all the worlds look to Terra, it is difficult to see the impact of its decisions on those far-flung worlds which it rules, and nothing can compare to the dazzling and intoxicating allure in this, the center of the galaxy. Still, for a time, the most important place in the universe. So one can see how the High Lords can quite justifiably consider themselves semi-deific beings, for they are the most talented, high-born, able, lucky, connected, brutal, venal, cunning, prescient, intelligent, remorseless, callous, disconnected, distant, self-absorbed, single-minded, and sociopathic humans to have ever lived. They stare into the abyss which is the present condition of the human race, its armies and Imperium, and they gain reports of the numbers, lethality, direction, aggression, support, and motivation of a score of races that want humanity dead. And they do this every single day. Each of them knows that to show weakness is to invite death. To be a minion is no better a protection. As allies rise and fall, and masters come crashing down, and they can never even trust their subordinates, not totally. Because when there is no living king, the crown of a councillor can seem almost as golden. Although the wings of the council must coexist, the madness of the setting is stark, for they do not see themselves as human first. If asked, of course they will state they are humans. They are servants of the Emperor and maintain his Imperium. But in reality, they had, up to this current era, acted more like competing kingdoms within the one realm. And the kings could fight one another in oh so many ways. Each was the absolute law in their organizations, the likes of which even our entire population of Earth could not compare. Not even close. Thus, these deities could also have their lifespans elongated. For the High Lords of Terra, centuries can come and go, while they take rejuvenation treatment and anti-agapics, holding off time itself for many years, but not for the many centuries or millennia possible for Astartes or Custodes. The consideration for the value of life is near non-existent. Each and every person below their exalted ranks are nothing more than a commodity to be traded for success at any one thing. A war, a production run, breeding more, harvesting or colonizing newfound worlds, but mostly, as with the beginning, war. It is the High Lords of Terra alone who can authorize the raising of a crusade. It is the High Lords of Terra alone who can authorize a founding, the creation of more chapters of Space Marines. It is the High Lords of Terra alone who can authorize the use of the Officio Assassinorum. The Imperium of Mankind is so vast that a petition for an audience with the High Lords of Terra can take years or more to be even just entered into a waiting list for consideration, and to have a decision made when there is no other authority high enough to break a deadlock can take a century to be realized. The lists of waiting applicants can be changed due to emergencies, and one can lead an entire line of lives waiting for the final verdict. And in that time, if you are assassinated, disappeared, or even just unable to survive in the teeming streets of Terra, then your petition will be removed, as happened in the Badab War. Large tragedies can happen from single events. Tiny delays can cause defeats. The slow-moving cogs of the Council can lose entire sectors before they mobilize. And yet, this is the system which has upheld the Imperium for over 10,000 years. Now to the how. Each of the High Lords is the leader of a huge organization with almost unimaginable power at their disposal. It is true that there have been times when wings of the Imperium were in outright war with each other. As rare as those have been, the constant shadow war for dominance is ever present. I began to discuss this in my video for Exterminatus, but feel it has been a while, so wish to elucidate again. Because any sane person would look at the universe, look at the hardships and the foes, the Necrons, Tyranids, Eldar, Tau, Orcs and Demons of Chaos, and any one of these existential threats would make any normal sane person believe that there would be utter unity and accord in the leadership of any race who lived in these times. Yet, it is not so. One office can gain ascendancy, as was done in the days of blood, when the false prophet Gojvandir ruled the Imperium with a false fanatic zeal. None could stand against him, as he managed to gain control of not just the administratum, but the ecclesiarchy as well. And the event of the beheading, when the Assassinorum executed the other High Lords. Well, this means that each of them must always be wary of the other. But one returns to the question of why on holy Terra do they squabble when the house is literally ablaze? Because the Imperium has lasted so long. It has weathered every storm, passed every test, and it still stands. The Necrons and the rift across space and the Tyranids are a threat of a magnitude not felt since the War of the Beast, yet none can truly believe this, not in their hearts. The High Lords are so convinced that the Imperium is eternal that they can ignore the prick of guilt whilst keeping up with their opponents. It is why the Imperium does not just use Exterminatus. They believe in their heart of hearts that they will always pull through. Many believe that their God Emperor guides their actions, their nation. But in reality, it is the myopic groupthink of the closely confined. They are all alike to get where they are, to get to the top. So they think alike, and none can ever trust the others, as they know themselves to be utterly untrustworthy. Yet things have changed, for the era Indomitus has begun, and the Avenging Sun has returned. His quest from a crag took him to Terra, and he soon asserted his dominance by having a personal audience with the Emperor himself. Then he declared himself the Lord Commander once more, and, as Lord Commander, he changed the position of many, yet he replaced, but he did not kill those he got rid of. And so, when he turned his back, it seemed he had let down his guard. Many of the High Lords who had been disposed actually rebelled against him. They attempted a coup of sorts. Yet they were predicted by the Primarch and easily thwarted. But take a second to let that sink in. These mere mortals had already actually met the Primarch, had believed he was the son of a god. Yet they had the temerity to not just contemplate, but actually initiate a confrontation with such a being. The sheer cojones. While the galaxy is being devoured by the Tyranids, the Necrons wake in their billions, and the rift is clear to see in the night sky. Even with all of this going on, some of the High Lords of Terra tried to dethrone the only person who could save them. The Avenging Sun, the Primarch of the 13th, Reboot Gilliman. And it beggars belief to anyone who is sound of mind. Thank you for your precious time. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.